So continuing on with functions, just as with consumer, supplier and predicate, there are more specific function interfaces that include the types of the argument and return value. For example, long to int function accepts a long argument and returns an int value. Int to double function accepts an int argument and returns a double value. Now we can also chain functions together just as we could with predicates. Now to chain functions we use the and then method in the function interface. That method takes a function as a parameter. So let's actually look at an example. Now remember that we had a lambda in a previous video that uppercased the first and last names and then concatenated them together. So let's actually do something similar by chaining functions. We're going to uppercase the employee name in one function and then we'll get the uppercased first name in another function. So first let's go ahead and actually add the function that uppercases the name. So function employee string, this one will be called uppercase, equals, and create a lambda expression, so employee arrow token, and it's going to be employee dot get name dot to uppercase. Very simple there. It just accepts an employee argument, gets the name and returns it uppercased. But what about the second one? Well, we want to get a substring of the uppercase name. In other words, we want to operate on the value returned from the first function, which is exactly how the and then method works. When you chain functions together, the return value of each function is operated on by the next function in the chain. So with that in mind, here's the function that gets the first name. So we're going to do function string concatenate, we'll call it, is equal to name arrow token name.substring 0 name.index of a space in single quotes. So that's our concatenate function. So let's now chain them together and print out the result. So we'll do another function. So function chained function equals uppercase dot and then get upper first name. So I guess to be precise here, I've made a typo. That should really be first name, because that's what that function is doing, is getting just the first name. And then here, we're going to be calling that method first name. So basically the uppercase function is getting the entire employee name, converting it to uppercase. The first name function is accepting that as a parameter, or will be passing it as a parameter, and that's returning just the first name. And as you can see, chaining functions together requires two steps. First, we have to create what's called a composed function. The function that calls the and then method will run first, and then the function passed as the argument to and then will operate on its result. So we can actually chain as many functions together as we want. Each function in the chain will operate on the last produced result. And as with any function, we call the apply method to run the composed function. So when we do that, we'll run it and we'll see what happens. Well, actually, I haven't added that line yet, have I? So I need to add that line. So let's just print out what's going to happen. So we're going to do a print out of chained function dot apply. And we're going to pass the first entry in our array list for employees using dot get 0. And that should return the first entry, which I think is John, in uppercase. So let's just try that. And you can see we've got John showing us the output. The function interface also contains a compose method that works in the opposite direction to the and then method. Now the function that calls the method is run second. The function that's passed as the argument runs first. Personally, I think it's easier to think in terms of the and then method. But the compose method is there for you to use if you prefer it. Alright, so let's actually change the example we just coded. So instead of printing out the first name, let's actually suppose we want to concatenate an employee's name and age instead and print the result. So we're going to change the second function to do that. But hang on, wait a minute. We'll need the employee object in the second step so that we can get the age. But we also need the uppercase name from the first step. So we actually need two arguments, but function only accepts one. Well, this is where the by interface comes in. For all the interfaces we've discussed, accept supplier, there are versions of the interfaces that accept 2 arguments. So in this case, we want to use the by function interface instead of just function. So with that in mind, let's create the function for the second step. So then here I'm going to type by function string employee string. We'll call this one concat age is equal to, and the parameters for this will be string name employee. Then we need an arrow token and a code block. Then we actually want to return from this, return name.concat, and it's going to be a space, double quote, plus employee.getAge. Then we need to close off the by function definition. So the question now is, can we chain this function to the uppercase function? Well, no, we can't. When we change functions, the result of one function becomes the argument for the next function. But a by function has 2 arguments, so it can't be the second or subsequent function in a chain. However, if the by function was the first step, then we could do it using by functions and then method. For the same reason that by function has to be the first function in a chain, the by function interface doesn't have a compose method. So instead of chaining, we have to uppercase and concatenate the age in 2 steps. So we're going to do that with string upper name is equal to uppercase dot apply employees dot get 0, the first entry in our array list again. Then we can print out concat age dot apply and upper name as the first parameter and employees dot get as the second parameter. So when we run that, we should see our first entry, John Doe, in uppercase. And of course also 30 being the age that we assigned when we set up John Doe here on line 13. Now there are also consumer and predicate interfaces that accept 2 arguments, but none for supplier because the supplier doesn't actually accept any arguments. So now we're going to look at the unary operator interface. This is a more specific type of function that accepts a single argument and returns a value of the same type as the argument. So for example, long unary operator accepts a long and returns a long. All the unary variants extend the function interface, so therefore they can be chained together just like functions can. So let's actually create an int unary operator that always increments its argument by 5. So to do that, we would do something like int unary operator, we'll call it int by 5, equals I, arrow token I plus 5. Then we do a print out of inc I by 5 dot apply as int 10. And we should obviously get the answer of 15 there. So let's run that and see if it works. There's the answer of 15 showing. So notice that rather than calling apply, we called apply as int when using the int unary operator. So we've now been through the 5 groups of interfaces in the java.util.function package. Now at the beginning of this walkthrough of the java.util.function, I said that the interfaces in this package, the java.util.function package, don't have any meaning in and of themselves. So hopefully at this point you've now got a better idea of what that means. The interfaces represent structures for lambda expressions. When we want to use a lambda expression that tests a value and returns true false, we can use a predicate. When we want to use a lambda expression in place of a method that accepts an argument and returns a value, we can use function. The interfaces don't dictate what the lambdas must do. They're not like interfaces such as runnable, which we know represents an object with a block of executable code, or an event handler, which we know contains code that will run when the user interacts with the user interface component. The Java util function interfaces describe the arguments and return value, but not actually what the implementations must do. I'm going to load up a little image on the screen now, showing a summary of the 5 groups of interfaces in the java.util.function package. Can be chained column is yes for consumer. Now we didn't actually cover this, but we can chain consumers together with the consumer.andThen method. Consumers don't return a value, so how does that actually work? Well, rather than working on the result of the previous consumer, each consumer in the chain runs using the argument that's passed to the accept method. So let's actually go back to Java and just look at a quick example of this. All right, so we can actually type something like consumer string C1 equals S arrow token S dot 2 uppercase. Then we can do consumer string C2 equals S arrow token and print out S. Then we can do C1 dot and then C2 dot accept hello world. When we run this, we should see hello world showing on the screen, or in the console at least, and there's hello world down the bottom. So remember that consumers don't return anything, so the result of the uppercase call in consumer C1 is actually lost. Each consumer in the chain is evaluated independently of the others, so there's no real advantage in this case to chain them together, but it can be done as you saw. So what do we do if we need more than 2 arguments in a lambda expression? Well, we can write lambda expressions that take as many arguments as you like, but you can't then use those that take more than 2 with any of the interfaces in the java.util.function package. The only time that this may be a problem is when we want to use an API that perhaps takes one of the interfaces as a parameter. So in that case, you probably want to massage your code so that it can use the lambda that matches the required interface. Alright, so that actually concludes our look at the java.util.function package. To see all the interfaces in the package and the methods available in each one, just check out the documentation here. Let's put that on the screen. There's lots of information for you to check out there. Alright, so that's the end of the video. In the next video, we're going to take a look at streams. So I'll see you in the next video.